Parents of the world, unite and see Beware of Children. If you think you know all the mischief kids can get into, wait till you see Beware. What happens when a couple turns their home into a vacation resort for children of the rich? Well, it becomes a United Nations for juvenile delinquents. See it all in Beware of Children from American International Pictures. For adults and kids only.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're gonna kiss me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
This is the American International Podcast. I'm Jeff Markin.
I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And in this episode, we visit Chatham House, the headquarters of Hilarious Havoc, featured in Beware of Children from 1961.
Beware of Children was directed by Gerald Thomas, written by Robin Estridge and Norman Hudis, based on the book Beware of Children by Verily Anderson. It was produced by Peter Rogers for Anglo Amalgamated Film Distributors.
Beware of Children stars Leslie Phillips as David Robinson, Geraldine McEwan as Catherine Robinson, Julia Lockwood as Fenella, also known as Vanilla, Noel Purcell as Tandy, Irene Handl as Mrs. Spicer, Joan Hickson as Cook, June Jago as Matron.
It also stars Cyril Raymond as Colonel Matthews, Esma Cannon as District Nurse, Alan Gifford as Edgar Treadgold, Sidney Tafler as Mr. Rockbottom, Brian Oulton as Vicar, Eric Pullman as King, Brian Rawlinson as Will, and Michael Sarn as Henri. There's a lot of people that weren't credited.
Now, the AIP cut of Beware of Children was not available to us, so we watched the British version, which is titled No Kidding.
No kidding?
No kidding. So as the title comes up, playful music plays on the soundtrack through the credits, and then when the movie starts, we see a car pulling up to a house, and a family of 3 get out of it.
It's not so much a house as it is an institution. It's not just a building, but like a series of buildings all connected. That's what it looks like.
This family is David Robinson, his wife Catherine Robinson, and their son Richard Robinson. A bit of a dump, isn't it, Dad, says Richard, and David chuckles as the 3 of them venture inside.
They go inside, where the dumpiness is confirmed. There's even a vagrant sleeping on the staircase. He awakens and recognizes the family. David introduces Tandy, the handyman, to his wife, and Tandy says that they should have told him they were coming. He'd have tidied the place up, trying to pass off a century of neglect as skipping his cleaning regimen for 2 days.
So it seems that David has just inherited this property, and Tandy asks David when he plans on moving in. We don't, says David. It's much too big for us, chimes in Catherine. You'll need a real Victorian-sized family for a place like this.
Tandy says, well, you should have one then. David explains that producing 11 more children isn't as easy as all that, and he confesses that they're broke. They've had some bad luck in some of their investments in the past.
Richard pipes up that there was a matter of a failed nightclub and a chicken farm. Catherine pulls him into her to shush him up, and David tells Tandy that their intention is to sell this property.
Tandy acts offended. Doesn't he matter to them? Tandy says that David's aunts would never have left the farm to him if they'd known he was planning to sell out 2 centuries of Robinson history. And then a light bulb goes off over David's head. Catherine sees that and tells him not to get any ideas, especially an idea like having a Victorian family now.
And Richard is concerned that this idea might involve more chickens. David says that he got an idea when Catherine mentioned a Victorian-sized family. They can open a holiday home for the children of the rich. It's better than chickens anyway, says Richard. And Catherine agrees it isn't as harebrained as some of David's other ideas. So you agree? asks David. I always do, smiles Catherine.
And then Tandy shrieks, Will! And then another hobo emerges, this time from the fireplace. He's Tandy's grandson, and he's supposed to be helping out here. Here we go again, quips Richard.
Now everyone is busy getting the place cleaned up for business. Will is outside on a ladder working on a windowsill when a car pulls up. Out jumps a little old woman. She goes to the door and Tandy answers it. She pushes past him and enters the house and announces herself, I'm Mrs. Spicer.
She says that she's an alderman, or alderwoman, I guess, and she wants this house. Catherine gently explains that it isn't for sale, but Mrs. Spicer already knows that. She's been fighting with the council to take over the house since it fell vacant.
She says that she's here because she always fights fair. Ever since the past owner of Chatham House passed, she's been working with the city council to see that this historical landmark is properly respected. And now she finds that the Robinsons have taken residence and intend to use the property for selfish reasons.
It's a purpose she feels is non-essential. What Mrs. Spicer wants to do is buy the house and use it as a home for underprivileged children. David says she's entitled to her opinion, but she says she's entitled to even more, the chance to petition for closure of the house and a compulsory purchase order, if she finds their plans lacking in even one respect.
She says she's already looked into the Robinsons' records and can't find any evidence of them having successfully run an institution like this before. Are we an institution? How awful, says Catherine. Richard volunteers that they ran a chicken farm and a nightclub. It wasn't a nightclub, says Catherine, and she suggests Richard go play outside. But Richard still has more to offer the conversation. It was open at night, Richard volunteers. Shall we say club with a query, suggests Mrs. Spicer.
Then David said he grew up going to holiday homes in the summer, and he hopes to make them much less miserable than what he had to endure. Mrs. Spicer says that she's learned enough for now, but, she says, they haven't seen the last of her, and then she leaves.
After Mrs. Spicer is gone, Catherine tells David to say something to his son. Richard, go boil your head, he says. Did I say something wrong? Asks Richard. Catherine asks David why he can never take anything seriously, but David finds Mrs. Spicer to be more a source of amusement than a threat, and he assures Catherine that they don't have to worry about her, and Chartham House will be ready as scheduled on opening day.
And now it's opening day, and Chartham House does appear to be ready to go. The family's doing some final spruce-ups, the Robinson sign is up, and Catherine can't believe that it's really happening.
David and Catherine are going over the list of children registered to stay at Chartham House for the season.
David says that they have 10 clients coming in today. 2 princes, the daughter of an earl, the son of a scrap metal millionaire, and 2 Treadgolds. Their father packs beef in Chicago. There's also 2 daughters of an African politician, and Fenella, if he got her name right. At least that's what it sounded like on the phone to David. They both hope that she's less weird than her name indicates. And they'll also have Angus. He was abandoned by his mother and will soon be dumped there by his dad so that Dad can go on a business trip.
Catherine still has reservations about this, but David says he knows this time they're going to succeed. They go inside as the children start to arrive. Will is with the Robinsons, wearing a torn shirt, and he asks if he should comb his hair. Yes, go do that, say the Robinsons. The Treadgolds from America are the first to arrive. They tell the Robinsons not to call them by their given names. They stink. They prefer to be called Dandy Big and Dandy Little.
And just for the record, Dandy Big is the boy and Dandy Little is the girl. They seem to talk like gangsters, or at least Dandy Big does, and throw shade on the place. It looks like a dump to them, too.
They're taken inside and they immediately start complaining about the accommodations. Dandy Big announces that they won't be staying there. David tells them that their parents have sent them to him, and without word from them, they won't be going anywhere.
The kids say that they're not going to hear from their parents, they're on safari, and agree to stay for a couple of days anyway.
Catherine tries to be more soothing while directing them to their rooms. Let's go before she sings, says Dandy Big.
Privately to Catherine, David says he fears he'll kill them both, but Catherine sees something else in their behavior.
The next to arrive is Lionel Rockbottom, along with his parents. Mr. Rockbottom goads Lionel to say how do you do, and says that they wouldn't believe the trouble he's having turning Lionel into a flaming gentleman.
The Rockbottoms are nouveau riche, and Mr. Rockbottom is kind of a classless jerk. They go inside, and Mr. Rockbottom barks that they've got to get going. He won't allow his timid wife to go look at Lionel's room. There's no time.
Before leaving, Mr. Rockbottom hands David a wad of cash. You don't have to pay in advance, says David. That's not payment, that's my boy's pocket money, says Rockbottom. He tells David not to stint him. He doesn't want any princes lording over his son. Anything Lionel wants, let him have it. And if he gives you any lip, let him have it. Mrs. Rockbottom turns to tell Lionel goodbye, and she starts to cry. Oh, Harry, let's take him with...
But Mr. Rockbottom says that what makes the upper classes upper is the fact that they dump their kids when they do fun stuff. Boarding school, holiday homes, etc.
Rockbottom believes that this will help build Lionel's character. And Rockbottom knows about having character. Just last week, the paper said he had it.
He opens his wallet and gives David a copy and tells him not to worry, he's got plenty. And he tells Lionel to have a good time or he'll brain him. And then he yells at the missus to get out of there.
Mr. and Mrs. Rockbottom leave, and Will takes Lionel up to his room. On the way upstairs, Lionel asks if there's a ghost in the house, and he's disappointed to hear that there isn't.
David thinks that Lionel is a strange boy, not someone who's been bullied and neglected. Then the doorbell rings. The Robinsons open it to see the African politician's daughters, Margaret and Eileen. They've arrived by taxi, and David has to pay the outrageous fee as the girls go in the house, explaining that their father booked their car on the wrong day, so they had to taxi in from Victoria Station in London.
So David pays the cabbie with money from Lionel's wad.
The girls go upstairs, and David marvels that their politically savvy father couldn't order a car on the right day.
Catherine mentions that the girl that they had hired, Edna, was supposed to have been here by now to help greet the children when they arrive. But they can't worry about that now because even more children are arriving. With fanfare, the 2 princes emerge from the car. Shall I curtsy? Catherine asks David. No, he replies, you'll break your leg. The 2 princes walk up to the Robinsons, and the elder of the 2 boys introduces himself. He's Hassan of the House of Belzik of Saudi Ismailia. The younger is Suleiman, with the same credits.
Hassan is the older by far. Once inside, they're both very polite to David and Catherine, but refuse when they're asked if they want to see a photo of their parents in the newspaper. And then a fleet of servants bring in their things, as another car arrives.
This car is delivering the motherless Angus. Angus's father has written to the Robinsons about his situation. He tells Angus that this is a nice place and he'll like it here, but he's got to be going.
He doesn't want a long, drawn-out goodbye. Angus asks when his mummy's coming back. His father lies that she'll be back soon, and then he goes.
Catherine starts to take Angus upstairs to his room when she's distracted by a commotion at the front door. 2 women have arrived and they're arguing. "What did you call me?" asks one. "Drunk I said, and drunk I repeat," says the other. "This is Matron and the cook. They're the hired help here at Chartham House."
Cook is the drunk one, and Matron is the angry one. Matron demands that the cook be fired immediately, and they start talking over each other when a teenage girl enters.
Catherine greets her. "Edna, you were supposed to be here this morning to greet the children, but thankfully she's here now." Catherine sends her upstairs with Angus to get him settled and to meet the other children. As the girl and Angus go upstairs, Matron says that she's a marvelous class of girl, unlike the woman they've hired as the cook.
And then the matron and the cook resume squabbling. On the train up there, Matron saw Cook guzzling booze all the way. Cook says that she has a chill. And then amidst all this chaos, an ambulance arrives, causing Cook to feel faint.
She says she can't stand the sight of blood and asks to be led to the kitchen.
But Matron goes outside. She's ready for this moment.
On the ambulance, the district nurse informs the matron that a girl has collapsed at the railway station.
She just happened to be there. The nurse suggested that she go to the hospital, and the girl freaked out and collapsed again. So the district nurse checked her luggage tag and put her on an ambulance to that destination.
Matron tells them to bring her inside, and she can take it from here. But the district nurse isn't ready to give up responsibility just yet. The Rockbottom children watch as the girl is brought in on a stretcher.
All the while, the nurse is carping on about how pregnant, unmarried teens take up so much of her time.
David's trying to inventory the children to figure out who the girl in the stretcher might be. It is either Priscilla or the one who sounds like Fenella, and that would make 10. 10? Asked the district nurse. 10 months? What a fascinating case.
Yes, somehow she's concluded that Fenella is a month overdue and she's going to have triplets, and she'll swear on it. She demands hot water and towels for the delivery.
The nurse is hard of hearing and misconstrues everything the matron says to her. When the matron says she can take it from here, nothing queer about it, says the nurse. Happens all the time.
And as the stretcher is carried upstairs, the nurse and the matron follow. In the kitchen, Tandy and the cook share a bottle of cider. Well, not share exactly. Cook loves it and snatches it away from him.
We're now upstairs, and the girl who had fainted is now lying in bed. Matron insists that this girl is her patient now, and the nurse is no longer needed. The Robinsons come in, and Matron asks that they show the nurse out. "That's the most sensible thing you've said," says the nurse, and she shoos the Robinsons out of the room.
She says she's got to examine the patient, but she'll allow Matron to assist her. Outside of the room, Catherine expresses regrets at accepting this girl to their home just with a phone call, and thinks that her cunning aunt waited until she was almost due to deliver just to let them deal with the birth and the aftermath. And also, her name can't possibly be Vanilla, can it?
She'll think they're mad if they call her Vanilla. At the bottom of the stairs, the Dandy Treadgolds act as the peanut gallery.
Dandy Big wishes that the Robinsons wouldn't fight, and Dandy Little teases him that his neurosis is showing.
Edna comes down and says she could only find one room with 3 beds in it. Catherine explains that Angus will be sharing a room with Lionel and Dandy Big. Edna reveals that she's not Edna, she's Priscilla.
The daughter of an earl? Catherine and David are aghast that they made minor royalty do chores, but Priscilla seems okay with it. In fact, she'd love to help.
She asks if she can continue being Edna, at least until the real Edna arrives. Priscilla thinks it's fun.
Yeah, it's not a chore to look after Angus. Then the bickering nurses bring their argument out into the hallway. Vanilla is no more pregnant than Matron is, says the district nurse. And not only that, she's angry that she got called away from her rounds for this. Matron yells that the district nurse inserted herself into the situation, and she was always free to go.
The matron starts to explain that, in the confusion with the ambulance, "Nonsense," interrupts the nurse. "There isn't a single contusion in that girl's body."
This nurse seems to be suffering from hilarious deafness, where the only things that she mishears is something guaranteed to cause mild amusement. The matron says that she's perfectly qualified to deal with colic. "Well, the same to you," says the nurse. She swears she's not deaf and she doesn't need some foul-mouthed old gamp swearing at her, so she stomps out of the house. Catherine apologizes to the matron, who's lost her voice from shouting at the nurse.
Then Catherine goes into the girl's room, where the girl is now awake and sobbing. "Vanilla?" asks Catherine. The girl turns around. "You must be Mrs. Robinson. You look so kind and so well fed."
Catherine scowls at her.
She says she's sorry she has to go. If a person comes in a state of malnutrition, it's obvious that they couldn't afford the fees at an establishment like this. Catherine says that no one's going to turn her out, but also that Matron didn't say anything about her being hungry.
Vanilla says she has a phobia about women in uniforms. They remind her of wardresses, prison matrons. Catherine's eyes grow large. Catherine says she'll have some food sent up. And oh, by the by, is your name really Vanilla? It's Fenella, actually, she says. But please call me Vanilla. With a new name, she might start a new life here. And then she starts sobbing again.
Catherine leaves, and Vanilla jumps up to close the door.
Vanilla continues her sham crying for a minute.
And then, stifling a laugh, repeats, "Vanilla."
And sometime later at Chartham House, all the kids are in residence, and they're very bored. They're just sitting around.
David goes to Catherine to see what she makes of this. Catherine says she knows how to cheer them up. She feels that what children need is freedom. These are rich kids dumped in a holiday home away from their families. David doesn't quite get what she's saying, but Catherine says that what they need is fun.
They have tons of money, but they've never learned how to have fun. David says that he has doubts about this, and Catherine says that she was never allowed to doubt his chicken farm or his nightclub, so maybe he should let her fill in the details on his holiday home idea.
She tells David to go ahead and tell the children that this is Liberty Hall. David thinks that this might sound better coming from a woman. Quite wrong, says Catherine. The dominant figure in a family unit is the male. David says he's going to remember that and hold her to it.
And now we're in Vanilla's room. She's in bed, apparently sleeping. She wakes up to see Will working on her fireplace. Wait, why is there a strange man working in a teenage girl's bedroom when she's sleeping? But apparently Vanilla has less of a problem with it than I do. She starts pretending to have a romantic dream.
She starts moaning, darling, darling, darling. And Will walks over to the side of her bed to see what she's mumbling about. Closer, she says. Instead, he taps her. Wake up, miss. Vanilla sits up. Was I dreaming? You must have been, says Will.
Vanilla says yes, she was dreaming of him. And she's had the same dream ever since she read Lady Chatterley's Lover. At this, Will tries to bolt out of the room, but she tackles him on the bed. She declares that she, or they, should succumb to their primitive desires, even though he's protesting.
He struggles and gets away, but she tackles him again and throws him onto her own bed. The Robinsons come in and stare with mouths agape. Freedom, says David. Hearing this, Vanilla faints and falls off the bed, and Will just looks like a deer caught in headlights. With a capital F, eh? Smirks David, as we fade to black.
And now, sometime later, Angus is watching Tandy run the vacuum. However, it's blowing instead of sucking. He gives it a closer inspection and then gets his beard caught in it somehow.
Tandy says somebody must have turned it around. Angus nods. You? asks Tandy, and Angus nods again. Why? Just to see what would happen. That's naughty, says Tandy. No, it isn't. It's freedom, says Angus.
Vanilla runs outside to see 4 of the children stuck by Will's side as he tries to mow the lawn. He's basically taking the kids for a spin. But when he sees Vanilla, he legs it and runs into the bushes.
Mrs. Spicer arrives and tells Tandy that she wishes to speak with Mr. and Mrs. Robinson. Back on side, Will peeks up from the bushes to see if the coast is clear. Vanilla sneaks up behind him and covers his eyes. Will yells out and starts to run away. He tells Vanilla to be careful. She may hurt herself. You do care about me, squeals Vanilla.
She asks if he's scared of her. Doesn't he like girls? Will thinks that Vanilla is too forward. She says that they could have nice times together, fingering his chest through the hole in his shirt. He tells her that it's all wrong. Girls aren't supposed to make advances. She says that she's a free woman, a modern one, and kisses him. He pulls away and runs off, Vanilla hot on his heels.
Inside, the Robinsons are meeting with Mrs. Spicer, who says she's there for an inspection. She believes they don't have the manpower to supervise the children's activities. On cue, Will runs past the window, chased by Vanilla, who's shouting, "You gorgeous boy."
David asks if Mrs. Spicer has the authority to inspect them. She asks them to imagine the headlines if an alderman is refused admission to their house. What goes on at Chartham House? The headline would go. You wouldn't, says Catherine. Oh, she would. Mrs. Spicer asks how much sleeping space the children have and how many bathrooms. She doubts that 10 children can be kept clean in 3 bathrooms. Catherine doubts that 10 children can be kept clean at all.
Mrs. Spicer asks about the staff and their qualifications. Catherine says they have the matron, who is with them while the school she regularly works at is on holiday. Is she qualified? asks Mrs. Spicer. No, says David. The school in question is in the habit of hiring African witch doctors.
Is there no one else? asks Mrs. Spicer. What about domestic staff? They have Tandy, who Mrs. Spicer dubs inebriate, Will, sometimes otherwise engaged, she says, and Cook, who chooses that moment to sail into the room on a cloud of alcohol fumes. And then she leaves.
They also have the girl who's supposed to be helping, but she hasn't shown up yet. You could put down started operations without adequate staff, David offers. My words exactly, says Mrs. Spicer as she writes that down.
And then Mrs. Spicer asks, where are their CLP1s? Have they turned them in yet? No, says David, because he has no idea what they are. Mrs. Spicer decries their administrative incompetence and explains that they should have filed those forms before receipt of their first foster child. Catherine is shocked to be considered a foster mother, and then Mrs. Spicer demands to inspect the house and grounds.
So David and Catherine follow Mrs. Spicer out to where the children are gathered. Spicer starts to question Priscilla, but Catherine sends Priscilla off and tells Spicer that, as she has said, the help hasn't arrived yet, and the Honorable Priscilla is simply one of her guests at Chartham House. Paying guests, sneers Spicer.
They walk around a little bit more and find Lionel napping under a tree. Mrs. Spicer inquires if he's ill. Catherine doesn't think a boy napping under a tree means that he has a bubonic plague. Mrs. Spicer doesn't like her tone, but Catherine doesn't like Mrs. Spicer putting sinister significance onto meaningless actions, like a boy sleeping under a tree.
Then from above them, Suleiman calls out from the tree, "Look out!" as he jumps down, sending Spicer to the ground, toppling over Lionel's inert form. What a silly place to stand, says Suleiman as he runs off. Inadequate supervision, spits Spicer. That's what it boils down to. Her inspection is done, and she should like to see the boy reprimanded for what he did to her. Catherine asks how could she punish him for her being in his way? What was he supposed to do, fly back up?
Mrs. Spicer is concerned that these hooligans have been encouraged to run wild. She wants Catherine to voluntarily shut down Chartham House, but Catherine says forcefully, to get them out, they'll have to throw them out. Just then, the dandies, big and little, who've been horseplaying on a balcony, accidentally tip a barrel of rainwater over, and all the water splashes onto Spicer.
Catherine looks up and commends them on a job well done. Tandy rushes over to offer Spicer a slug from his bottle. It'll make you feel right as rain, he says. She pushes him away. Right as a rain barrel, he says, taking a swig himself.
In the kitchen, Catherine goes looking for Cook. She's not there, but David is. He's under the sink working on some plumbing. David says he passed Cook's room earlier and heard her snoring like a squadron of bombers. Catherine goes to make breakfast, but David volunteers and tells her to go wake up the kids.
As Catherine goes to do this, the phone rings, and Catherine goes to answer it, but Dandy Little bounces down the stairs and says it's for her. Don't be silly, says Catherine as she answers the phone. It's a daily call from Nairobi. Dandy Little grabs the phone and takes the call.
Catherine's eyes grow huge as she listens to the conversation. Little's talking to someone named Mar, mentioning that they're enjoying themselves because they get to do whatever they like there. And also, can she call her parents in the jungle? It's only a few extra pounds a minute. After the call is concluded, Little looks at Catherine and says, "Told you it was for me," and runs off.
As David continues work on the leaking sink, Matron is in the kitchen complaining to David that she doesn't have a sick bay, and David's eggs are burning. David runs over to the skillet and grabs it with his bare hands. He yells out and throws the pan as Cook comes in. Cook tells him not to be so loud, and she doesn't like people mucking about in her kitchen. Then be here to prevent it, says David.
Cook, who's suffering from a hangover, complains that her head hurts, and then shouts at David that she'll snatch Matron's eyeball through her keyhole the next time she catches Matron spying on her. And then she holds her head because she's just made her own headache worse.
David goes out to join Catherine, and she informs him that Dandy Little has been making calls to Nairobi. David says not to worry, they'll just add the calls to their parents' bill.
But Catherine feels that these rich parents will just weasel out of paying it. She asks about breakfast. David says Cook's getting it. David blames Catherine for letting the kids do as they please, so she gets defensive. What's a few paltry pounds compared to the joy of seeing the unrestrained kids do whatever they like? David calls Catherine out on her hypocrisy, and she calls him a brute.
They start bickering, and Dandy Big runs over and begs them to stop. If things are that bad, get a divorce, he says, but don't fight. Later, David is walking around outside when he notices the princess and Dandy Big are chopping down a tree. It comes down and falls right on David as he's walking. He asks what they're doing. Playing lumberjack, they say. David asks if they really kill each other when they play soldier. The boys say that they're just exercising their freedom.
Yes, Catherine did say that anything goes. David returns to the house to bring up the same argument with Catherine. She's still defending her position, and she's still winning. David walks away from this one. He goes into the dining room where 3 of the girls are playing fashion show with Catherine's curtains. Thinking that Catherine will finally regret her choice, he calls her into the room, but Catherine's fine with it and they can just add it to the parents' bill. David thinks that those parents are paying them to screw up their kids. Catherine calls this comment abusive.
Catherine returns to the kitchen to find Fenella in there, kneading dough. She feels she has to do these chores in return for her keep. She points out that her father had gone to jail, and her mother threw herself out a window a few days later, and Fenella wishes that she had taken her with her.
Her aunt took her in, but her aunt is abusive, and she starves her. Catherine is upset and offers to speak to Fenella's aunt, but Fenella tells her that the aunt's in prison for the next 8 years. Catherine asks about the charges, and Fenella just says she's in for everything. The judge called her a criminal degenerate. And Fenella thinks that Catherine must feel the same way about her after seeing her chasing Will.
Fenella explains that she just wants to be liked and to be cared for, and that's why she chases Will. Catherine understands and tells her she can forget the past and move on. I've almost managed to here, says Fenella. Catherine tells her that she can stay with them, but she'll never get paid, says Fenella. But Catherine says their reward would be seeing her happy and giving her a job. They embrace, but Catherine looks out the window and screams.
As Catherine has seen the boys sawing Margaret or Eileen, I can't tell which one, in half, she bolts out to the yard to investigate. But just as she does, the trick is revealed. Each of those girls were in their own box, just as the trick requires. Catherine says that she just wanted to see that trick up close and backs into the house, ashamed of herself.
As she goes back into the kitchen, David comes in to investigate her screaming. Catherine tells him it was the children playing outside, but David rightly says it sounded like Catherine's scream. But she just shrugs it off and goes back to working on her pastry.
Later, Catherine is taking a nap in their bedroom when David bursts in to say that he's on to her. He's asked around and found out those kids were doing a trick outside. Aha! Catherine says it was just a trick. David heatedly says that they need to have rules or someone is going to get hurt. And Catherine pouts.
Just then, Tandy bursts in, telling them to come quickly. Some of the children are digging a tunnel under the lake. They rush down and the kids reveal that Angus is in the tunnel. He was the first to go through because he's the smallest. Just then, bubbles start erupting in the middle of the lake. The tunnel's collapsed, shouts Catherine, and she and David rush out into the water to rescue Angus.
But just as they're fishing around for him, Angus emerges from the shore. He's damp but amused. David and Catherine turn around to see him and are quite relieved that they haven't killed any of their children yet.
Cook is in the kitchen when Matron comes in. The matron has the diet sheets ready for the cook. The cook takes it and tears it up. Matron tells the cook that she shall complain to Mrs. Robinson. Complain away, says Cook. They bicker a bit, and it ends with Cook throwing flour on Matron.
Later, Matron returns to the kitchen and tells the cook that those children should not eat spicy food. The cook denies this request. She's put many a tasty meal into many a healthy young body. and she tells Matron to go mind her own business.
They continue to argue, and Cook throws a pot. It goes across the room and lands on Tandy's head. Then the cook throws a pie into Matron's face, demanding that she stay out of her kitchen.
Food fight! That night, the children sneak out of the house and bundle themselves into the Robinsons' car. Fenella's at the wheel. I don't think she has a license, and she's only technically familiar with the act of driving.
She says that she'll be all right once she gets the car started. The car pulls out, and the sound awakens Catherine inside. She tells David that their car's being stolen, and the two of them run out into the hallway. Lionel is there, disappointed that all the noise wasn't caused by a ghost. Priscilla comes out, and Catherine tells her to be quiet. She might wake the other children. Priscilla says she won't wake them. The others are gone. And Catherine starts to have a panic attack. The children have been kidnapped in their car.
David thinks that only a maniac would kidnap that many children. A maniac, says Catherine, who faints. Matron and Priscilla catch her and help her. David dithers as Catherine begs him to phone the police. David thinks that maybe it's a prank. Priscilla confirms that the kids had earlier talked about going out to get something to eat, as dinner was rather disappointing.
Catherine realizes that her son, Richard, is with them and starts to have another panic attack.
It's a wonder that we've never seen Richard since the beginning of the movie, and now she finally cares about him.
So next we see David hopping on a bicycle to give pursuit. Meanwhile, the car full of kids pulls up at a cafe, and they all pile in to give their orders.
Tandy Big is ordering pie and double French fried tomatoes, just like an American loading up on fried foods that ought not to be fried. He also asks for peas, flan, and custard, and more.
Angus, who had been told that he was too young to go with them, had snuck out anyway, and he's in the back of the car, and he comes out of the trunk and goes inside. The other kids chide him that he wasn't supposed to come because he's too young. The cafe owner says they're all too young, and he wants them out. So do I, says David, who just arrived himself. So David hauls all the kids back to Chartham House. Catherine is relieved that they're all right. No, says David, they're all wrong. And he's going to do something that hasn't been done before. He's going to give the children consequences for their actions. Tandy Big says that they're paying to be here, and David is in no position to make such demands, and besides, their money will take care of any trouble they might get into. But David tells him to pipe down or he'll give him something for free.
At this threat of corporal punishment, Tandy Big finally sees David's point. David tells the kids that they're grounded for the next 2 days and orders them to bed. He limps over to the stairs, and Catherine, seeing that David hurt himself on his bike ride, finally accepts that she may have been mistaken in her beliefs.
The next day, the kids are all confined to the house, but fortunately for them, it's raining, so they wouldn't want to go outside anyway.
Tandy Big is cleaning a gun. The other kids are just reading or coloring.
Angus is putting on his rain gear. Catherine asks him where he's going, and Angus explains that he has to go out and feed the frog. Frogs feed themselves, smiles Catherine. Not this one, says Angus. He's a little frog, and he doesn't have a mummy or a daddy.
Catherine takes pity on him and takes him outside, where they don't find a frog. Angus says that maybe the frog's mummy came back, and then wishes that his own would do the same, as he tearfully runs back into the house. Catherine watches him, anguished.
Watches Angus in anguish?
She's anguished over Angus.
David is at his desk looking over the bill for the equipment he allowed Matron to order for that sick bay. He wishes he hadn't agreed to it. But Catherine says it'll be fine. There'll be positive word of mouth, and Dad should keep Chartham House going and help pay for everything. But, she says, word of mouth might not be so good if the children are incarcerated. They're not liable to give good reviews.
David reminds her that, according to her, he's the male authority figure in the house. And anyway, there's only one more day of confinement. Catherine thinks that there's something brewing with the children. Speaking of a brewery, the cook's in the kitchen tasting the sauce, so to speak, and then for some reason she flings a roast pan at the hutch, breaking all kinds of dishes and spoiling dinner.
David and Catherine rush in to see what's going on. A cook says she had another run-in with the matron, and it upset her so, and now she must go out and clear her head. So the cook leaves, and Catherine supposes that she and David will now have to cook the evening meal. They hear a scream and rush out in time to see Cook stumbling down the stairs, yelling all the way. The children ask Matron what's the matter with Cook. She's ill, explains Matron. Ill, says Tandy Big. She's plastered. Matron gathers the children and takes them outside just to keep the cook out of their eyeline.
That night, the kids are planning another prank. Hassan's wearing a ghost costume and then puts an enormous skull headpiece on. They want to scare Lionel. Suleiman and Dandy are also wearing ghost costumes, but no skull mask. But instead of scaring Lionel, Hassan creeps up behind the cook who's looking in the mirror.
David comes out and reprimands the boys as the cook runs into her room and starts destroying her bottle, saying she'll never touch another drop. David, I think she means it, says Catherine. Hassan says they didn't mean to frighten Cook, and he'd like to apologize to her and explain. But David thinks it's better if they just let Cook believe what she wants to believe. And then he sends the children off to bed.
The next day, we have a new arrival at Chartham House. It's a handsome young man. Fenella's there to greet him, and she's already in love. He's French, you see, and she's smitten.
David comes out, and the boy introduces himself as Henri Dumont. He explains that his father had sent a letter, and he's going to be staying with them.
David hasn't received any letter, and Henri says that the letter will arrive tomorrow and explain everything.
Henri tells Catherine that his father would like to undress her. She's not sure how to take this, and he explains that he's a couturier and that her figure is magnifique. Catherine says that he's frank, and he says, "No, I'm Henri." "Vive la France," says Fenella, collapsing into a chair.
Later we see Tandy rushing back into the house with news of Spicer. She's back and she's bringing company. The council chairman is there to inspect the place. This is Colonel Matthews.
David and Catherine feel that since they have a heads up, they could be ready for this inspection.
David orders all the staff to gather for a council of war. They need to get everything shipshape for this inspection, or else the children will be sent away. Then we see that Margaret and Eileen are outside the window listening to this, and they take the news to the other children.
So Mrs. Spicer and Colonel Matthews arrive for that surprise inspection. They're in the office with David and Catherine when Matron comes in with a report on each child.
Everything looks a lot more respectable now than it has in the past. Matron's even wearing a wimple over her uniform.
David looks over the reports and approves them and dismisses the matron, but asks that she take the inspectors in to see Cook.
Mrs. Spicer thinks that this visit with Cook will be the final nail in the coffin of Chartham House.
But in the kitchen, Cook is ready for them too. She is jovial and cordial with them.
And sober.
Matthews is amused with her, but Spicer isn't buying her act.
Cook offers them a sample of her cooking, which the Colonel enjoys immensely.
Cook is asked if she has everything she needs, and Cook says that she's fine except that she's still waiting on Matron's diet sheets. She says she won't make a move without the matron's approval.
She won't even boil an egg.
Just then the matron enters and smilingly hands them over.
Then Mrs. Spicer says they need to talk to the children. Outside, the children are all wearing their Sunday best and saying exactly what the councilman wants to hear. They're all happy. Mrs. Spicer asks them if Chartham House closed and the kids all had to return to their parents, wouldn't that be preferable to them? The kids disagree.
Some would call their embassies and start international incidents. Dandy Little says she would cry for a week. David and Catherine are watching this from inside, and they note that everything seems to be going well. They go outside to ask if Spicer and Matthews would now like to inspect the children's quarters, but Matthews says that won't be necessary. He's satisfied with what he's seen, but Mrs. Spicer isn't satisfied. She opens her mouth and says that she's an interfering old trollop, finishes Angus. Matthews laughs. Don't be angry with him. Out of the mouths of babes. They go back to their car, but Tandy appears to give Mrs. Spicer a bouquet of flowers he picked himself and a bouquet of CLP1s, just like she asked for. As they drive off, Hassan sighs, "Good, now we can relax." As the children run off, Catherine suggests David stop them, but David says no, they've earned it. There are times for freedom, and this is one of them.
And later we see Henri and Fenella making out on the lawn. They have a bit of a communication deficit, though. Henri tells Fenella that she's a virgin. She doesn't understand what he's talking about.
David and Catherine are on a stroll themselves, and they come upon Henri and Fenella. They listen for a moment and agree that those two kids are going to need a talking to, and due to awkwardness, they'll each take on one.
They're going to split them by gender. Catherine and Fenella chat about love and stuff. Catherine tells Fenella that she's not really in love with Henri. She just fancies him.
Fenella says she is, and she's going back to Paris with him. "He's asked you?" asks Catherine. "Not yet, but he will," says Fenella.
Then we see David and Henri chatting. David tells Henri that British girls are different from French girls. They need commitment. Henri takes this in seriously.
Back inside, Catherine tells Fenella that she'll be in love lots of times in her life, so she shouldn't take this so seriously. Back outside, Henri isn't completely buying what David's selling here. Inside, Fenella tells Catherine that she's very sweet for her concern, but that she shouldn't worry about her. And outside, David asks Henri if they understand each other. No more amour, and Henri agrees to this.
And now the holiday season is over. The parents are returning to pick up their children, and Mrs. Spicer has returned at the same time. Fenella tries to get a moment with Catherine and explains that she can't stay with them, and Catherine tells her not to be ridiculous and that she can't talk right now.
Mrs. Spicer warns Catherine that she has been forced to canvass the council to assure a majority on her acquisition of Chartham House when it next becomes available. "We'll fight you," says Catherine. Spicer tells her not to waste her time. She'll lose. Chartham Place is as good as hers already. "Then make yourself at home," says Catherine. The parents have started to gather in the house and are inquiring as to where their children are.
David comes out of the bedroom and says that he's consulted with the children and they aren't leaving with their parents. This enrages the parents, but David says the kids are happy there, and David and Catherine are like real parents to them now. But he says the children have said they will leave with their parents if they promise not to push the children out of their lives again, even if it is to stay at a place as nice as this.
The women are willing to agree to these terms and eventually convince the men to agree too. David whistles and the children file downstairs with their suitcases. "Why, they've packed, the little devils, they knew they'd win."
The parents see that they've been snookered. Davis says that it shows that the kids knew their parents would do the right thing, which mollifies them a bit. Most of the children have left. Fenella is still there, though, and she tries to talk to Catherine, but again gets dismissed.
Catherine instead addresses Mrs. Spicer and tells her that it appears they've put themselves out of a job. "Not so fast," says Mrs. Spicer. She imagines that overprivileged children could continue to benefit from a place like this. So as far as she's concerned, the Robinsons have a job for life.
She wishes them jolly good luck and says that she'll requisition Colonel Matthews' unused building for her scheme to help underprivileged children. He was just going to put that building to use for something that she considered frivolous. And then Spicer leaves.
Priscilla runs up and asks if she can return and help next season. David says that it's all right with him if her father agrees. Next, Henri bids his adieu.
Priscilla kisses Henri goodbye, and they both leave together.
Now Catherine finally has a moment for Fenella. Too late, she says, as another couple comes in. Fenella greets them. Hello, Mummy. Hello, Daddy.
She didn't have time to warn them that she's not a destitute orphan.
Her mother says that Fenella looks peculiar and asks if she's been telling stories again. She questions Catherine if she had told her that her sister was a drug addict. No, says Catherine, just a general degenerate. Fenella's parents drag her off for a talking to. Angus comes in as his parents, Daddy and Mummy come in. Mummy shouts, Angus, who runs into his mother's arms. As they leave, little Richard asks when will they all be coming back. He has nobody to play with now.
Catherine turns to David and proposes that now that they're secure, maybe they can do that Victorian family thing. And then they kiss passionately, and that's the end.
You are listening to the American International Podcast, and we're discussing Beware of Children from 1961.
The film, released as No Kidding in the United Kingdom, was adapted from the book Beware of Children, a memoir written by Verily Anderson and released in 1958. Anderson grew up with parents who ran a holiday home for children in Sussex, England. The home atmosphere there was infant pandemonium, according to Janie Hampton, who wrote Anderson's obituary in 2010.
Producer Peter Rogers, director Gerald Thomas, and writer Norman Hudis were all behind the popular Carry On film series, which put out 31 films between 1958 and 1992. Irene Handl, Joan Hickson, June Jago, and Esma Cannon, who all starred in Beware of Children, were also regulars in that film series.
Exteriors for Beware of Children were filmed at Burton Spring, a former children's home in Beaconsfield, England, according to an article in the Buckinghamshire Bucks Free Press, published on Friday, October 5, 1960. According to the article, filming had begun on Tuesday of that week. Quote, complete with all the trappings of a large-scale film production, a Pinewood unit has moved in on the house and its extensive grounds for location work that may take over a week to complete, said the article. Interiors were filmed on Pinewood Studios in Buckinghamshire, and production was expected to take 6 weeks total.
According to an article published around the same time in the Torquay Herald Express, Leslie Phillips and Geraldine McEwan worked together before Beware of Children. The two played newlyweds in the long-running stage production of For Better or For Worse at the London Comedy Theatre in 1953. Leslie Phillips starred in 5 Peter Rogers-produced movies before Beware of Children. This was McEwan's first starring film role. In 1951, she was to have debuted in the film Who Goes There, based on the stage play she starred in, but came down with appendicitis and had to bow out of the production.
June Lockwood, who played Fenella, is the daughter of popular British actress Margaret Lockwood. According to the AIP Pressbook, Julia grew up in a show business atmosphere and attended drama school starting at age 5, but it wasn't until she was 12 that she seriously considered a role in acting. She began acting in stage and television productions, including playing the role of Wendy and then Peter Pan in the stage production of that play.
No Kidding was released in the UK on a double bill with The Man Who Was Nobody on December 18, 1960. Beware of Children was released in the United States in April of 1961, paired with Alexander the Great in some markets.
AIP recommended that theater owners use the title Beware of Children with no other copy for an advanced teaser campaign for the film. They also recommended a newspaper contest asking parents to write a short essay on why one should beware of children, a tie-in with the Children's Portrait Studio, and a portrait display in the theater lobby with pictures of children under a banner reading, Beware of Children? Note the question mark, they said. They also suggested staging a picket line comprised of dogs carrying small picket signs reading Beware of Children that would march up and down in front of the theater for the benefit of local press.
Taglines for Beware of Children include, No kidding, it's fabulous fun.
Just the tonic for that after-Christmas feeling.
Parents of the world unite.
From the producers of Carry On Nurse, another daffodil to shake your funny bone.
The wacky, wonderful world of little monsters is topped by a sex teenager with an urge to splurge.
Oh, that's weird. The daffodil one is weird too, but apparently there's a daffodil joke in that Carry On Nurse movie that was really funny.
Yeah, we mentioned it in the Carry On Doctor episode.
Oh, yeah, I've never seen it, but I guess I should look it up.
I have, but it's been like 35 years.
I don't know what the scene is about. Something really funny with a daffodil. The review in the Exeter Express and Echo called No Kidding as British as a vicarage party and much more amusing. As a production, this is a comparatively modest affair, but the Carry On series team have put loads of crackers into this farcical romp.
Patrick Fleet in the Bristol Evening Post wrote, Geraldine McEwan makes a welcome screen debut in No Kidding. A pleasant enough little romp, but hardly the most imposing setting for such an auspicious event. There are some remarkably competent performances from the 10 children. Gerald Thomas has directed them quite miraculously, but the whole thing conveys a rather unfortunate lack of invention, and after an hour or so, even the youthful exuberance of Mr. and Mrs. Robinson's guests begin to pall.
Eric Shorter of the Daily Telegraph wrote, "Alas, no kidding, a dismally uninventive farce sticks firmly in the throat."
The Lincolnshire Echo's review said of No Kidding, "At times, it gets a little too determined to win a laugh at any cost, but it gives Leslie Phillips a welcome chance to move one step away from the cloddish character he usually portrays, and he does extremely well in this more serious comedy role."
The whole Daily Mail's review said, "No Kidding is excellent holiday fare, for it is lighthearted but intelligent. If you want to wind up the holiday with a good laugh, this is a must."
Ernest Betts in London's Sunday People said, "No Kidding is a screwball comedy about a nice married couple that runs a holiday home for the idle rich. It's an agreeable lark, but like certain Christmas crackers, it doesn't quite go off."
Harrison's Reports reviewed the American international release Beware of Children, calling it good. Imported from Britain, where it was titled No Kidding, this uneven but well-enacted comedy by the Carry On series filmmakers concerns a young British couple who establish an integrated resort for the wealthy, parent-neglected children. This one should have appeal to all age groups of both sexes. Its humor, dealing mainly with childcare and ranging from slapstick to sophisticated, relies on unusual as well as stock characters. There are no U.S.-known stars in the oft-amusing black and white programmer.
Paige Hammonds in the Cincinnati Enquirer wrote, "Between the opening and closing of this farce, there are 80 minutes and 80 pretty fair jokes. The timing of the jokes is excellent. Don't worry about getting involved in the feeling of any of these characters, for the producers have so arranged it that you will be saved from the embarrassment of any emotions at all."
Jeanette Eichel of the Buffalo News said of the screening she attended, "The initial audience was composed mainly of children, who appeared contented through the two features, Beware and Alakazam the Great, by munching candy and popcorn."
John Buston in the Austin Statesman wrote in his review, "Being a creation of the British movie-making team responsible for Carry On Nurse, it's hardly unnatural to expect this new import to offer us another round of the freewheeling tone of those earlier films. But surprisingly enough, Beware of Children is a comedy of a completely different cut. A little slapstick, all right, but more or less restrained and, as a matter of fact, only occasionally amusing. A funny moment is drummed up here and there, but the kids just aren't funny enough to keep viewers from sensing that the picture's title is perhaps more of a warning than they at first may have realized."
Sidney Johnson in the Montreal Star said of Beware of Children, "This is a pleasant little picture that roams all the way through witty comedy, through light sentiment, to corny slapstick. It has obviously been made to please every possible member of an entire family. A rather dangerous goal," he said, but ended his review with, "The cast is excellent."
John Gordon of the Springfield, Massachusetts Morning Union wrote, "The drama churns up some action and occasionally solid mirth, but mostly the comedy is labored and obvious." So as I mentioned, Cheryl, the AIP version of Beware of Children was not available to us. So for this episode, we watched No Kidding, which is the original British version. I don't know if there are any differences in the two cuts besides the title, but I thought that Beware of Children was probably the better title of the two.
Well, it was the title of the memoir that inspired the movie, so it does make sense. I think No Kidding doesn't really make sense in this context.
It doesn't.
So AIP for once retitled the movie better than the original.
Yeah, I was going to say that was kind of an unusual move on AIP's part to actually use a better title.
Yeah, they're known for creating something that's misleading at best and an outright lie at worst, just to get butts in seats.
What really struck me about this movie is that it's kind of weird that Mrs. Spicer is supposed to be the villain here, because the things that she was is things that we'd think that we would be rooting for. And that actually the people who want to help the rich people might be the bad guys?
Maybe post-war Britain was a place where the overprivileged were the real concern and not the underprivileged. Actually, isn't that kind of the case always? I mean, this one at least is honest about it. Won't anyone think of the idle rich?
And Spicer is portrayed as kind of a Mrs. Gulch type from The Wizard of Oz. She does everything but ride up on her bicycle and go...
broomstick.
But she just seems really villainous, but what she wants is really noble. So it's kind of a difficult place to put yourself in as a viewer of this film.
It's not only that she wants the underprivileged to be helped, but she wants the Robinsons to comport with local laws and regulations when they're dealing with children. And they're just kind of half-assing it. They don't have the proper staff. They don't have the proper paperwork. They don't have the proper supervision. They don't really have anything that they should have to run a house where they care for multiple children. And yet we're supposed to believe that they're the good guys here. So that is a little difficult to swallow.
But the way it's presented, it's easy to swallow. I mean, you just go with the flow here, and it's a fun movie. It's cute.
It's because the Robinsons are so kind and reasonable that you want to be on their side. They're not in it for the money. They do want to have a successful career of some kind.
They're in it for the money.
Well, they're not in it to become millionaires themselves. They're in it to help children and also figure this is a way that they can make a living. But they also don't really know what they're doing.
It's kind of funny that they forgot their own kid through most of the film. Richard disappears until they duck out to go to that diner. He shows up there, and that's like the only time within the middle of the film you see him.
And then we see him again at the end, wondering where all his playmates were when we never saw him in the yard playing with any of the other kids.
And it was funny that David and Catherine never seemed concerned about the whereabouts of their son. Obviously, they had a lot on their plate. There was 10 other kids in the house.
But now they're going to have another baby, and they're going to neglect him even more. What did you think of Catherine's no rules policy for the kids?
Well, that obviously is not a good idea. You need some sort of rules in order to maintain order.
I would think that what children of the rich would need more is discipline and love and less freedom. What they seemed to not get from their parents was any attention whatsoever, positive or negative. And so just letting them run off on their own unsupervised is the exact wrong thing to do here.
And Catherine does eventually admit that maybe she was wrong.
Because I think she realizes once David takes over and starts imposing discipline that everyone is a bit happier. They seem to be more in control of themselves, and they seem to be fine with amusing themselves in ways that don't involve destruction of property and personal endangerment. But again, they're so cute together. I could tell that they've worked together before because they seem really natural as a couple.
The only problem I have with Leslie Phillips is that he kind of resembles Jeffrey Jones.
That's not his fault. He can't be held responsible for that.
I don't hold him responsible for that, but it's kind of disturbing to see him on screen like that.
I didn't quote it, but one of the reviews called him the Cary Grant type. I don't see that at all. No, I don't.
I did like Geraldine McEwan, though.
Oh, she's lovely. I would love to see her in something else. She's really mild-mannered here, perhaps too mild-mannered in places where she should actually be losing it. But she's so nice. She's so sweet. She's so kind. She's so lovable. And she's funny, too.
The scene where she takes Angus outside to look for the frog was really touching.
It broke my heart. The poor kid. Luckily, they engineered a happy ending for him. Otherwise, it'd be unforgivable.
Yeah, I kind of want to know what Angus's mother did up and leave in the first place and just come back like nothing happened. There's an untold story there.
There absolutely is. Well, we're supposed to believe that with all these kids, that there's something in their past that has kind of messed them up a bit. Like, what's up with Lionel? His mom was wishy-washy. His dad was an overbearing creep who was going to try and force him to be a flaming gentleman.
It's kind of funny because Lionel is the one with this big wad of cash to be given to him at his own whim, but all he wants to do is sleep under a tree all the time. He's napping constantly.
I think that he just wanted to be left alone. That was his holiday goal. And it's such a weird concept of ditching your kids for an entire summer so that you can go travel to India, do business stuff. I just can't imagine that. I think the longest I ever left my kids when they were young was overnight.
Your parents weren't rich. I was left alone all the time.
My mom was always there, even when my dad did travel.
What do you think about Vanilla's story that she tells to get into the Chartham house? She's there legitimately. Her parents sent her there.
Yeah.
She has a story where her aunt sent her there.
Even though her aunt was in prison. And she has no money, and she's starving, although she looks perfectly healthy. Nobody called her on that. Sort of like the opposite of Angus's story, where Angus genuinely did have an unhappy home life that Catherine was very brokenhearted over. Vanilla's just a liar, and she's doing this for attention. Her parents seem lovely.
I don't know if it was for attention. I mean, it probably was. Maybe she's just a compulsive liar. But it does seem like something a rich person might do to try to get out of paying their bill.
Speaking of that, did anybody pay their bill? They didn't pay before they dropped their kids off, which astounded me. Like, they have to feed them all summer and pay for their phone calls and the staffing, and there's no upfront payment for these kids.
I think we can assume that there was. The only evidence that we had was that when Mr. Rockbottom handed David that wad of cash, he said, you don't have to pay in advance, which kind of implies that nobody had to pay in advance.
Yeah. How did they afford all this? They were broke before they started. Then they had to invest in staff and equipment. And then somehow they are just miraculously going to make this up at the end of the summer. When the parents came back, it seems like they all just kind of came into the house, took their kids, and left. I didn't see any money changing hands. No checks were handed over. Did you have a favorite kid amongst all the kids?
No. I didn't really care for any of the kids.
They didn't really spend a lot of time on the kids. They invented these situations where something wacky would happen, but then we didn't really get to know them. I thought that the dandies were funny, especially their completely different accents. The boy sounded like he could have been from Chicago. The girl sounded like she was English, pretending to be Southern.
Hassan and Suleiman were very, very polite, and that seemed to be their role. They were princes, but they definitely weren't lording over the others. They were very polite children.
Well, they had the daughter of an earl. They had the daughters of an African politician.
Yeah, they didn't have much to do except you saw it in half. You didn't see them most of the time.
Probably the most interesting thing was that this group of children was very diverse. For 1960 in Britain, we had kids from Africa, we had kids from Saudi Ismailia, whatever that is, but nothing was ever made of that. This is one of the few movies that has people of color in it that doesn't insult them in some way for being people of color from this era, I mean.
Going back to Mrs. Spicer and her crusade, all this stuff that she's trying to trip up the Robinsons with are things that she might have difficulty with herself if she was running her own home there.
Oh, yeah.
Because she probably would have moments without adequate staff.
Yeah, her Edna might not have shown up.
And she'd still have the same number of rooms, the same number of bathrooms. So I don't know if it would really help her case if she did pursue this and got shut down under those grounds. Because then she'd kind of be biting herself in the foot going forward. She'd have to have a lesser amount of kids.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't even think about it till you mentioned it.
Your actions have consequences. We learned that in this film. You're going to be grounded for 2 days.
Maybe 2 days. After one day, they were already divided on whether to continue it.
You'll be grounded for the rainy day.
I think the one character that was the most pointless, though, was the district nurse.
She was comedy relief all the way, and she was very, very funny.
I found her annoying. I'm sort of like on Matron's side. Like, why is this busybodied, slightly deaf person inserting herself into this situation that she has no business being in?
Well, it didn't need to be there, and it's forced humor, and it goes in with the character of the Carry On films.
I've only seen the one Carry On film, the one that we did however long ago it was. We did Carry On Doctor, and those weren't as dire as I thought they were going to be, as corny. They were a little, but not as bad as I thought.
A lot of them is that play on words humor.
And this, I thought, was a lot better. I thought this had a lot more to offer because it was sort of warm family film. In fact, it's not terribly funny at all.
No, it's cute. So with that in mind, how are you going to rate Beware of Children on our AIP scale, where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic?
It'd be really tough to call this an awesome movie, but it feels very mean-spirited to say that it's just intermediate. I enjoyed watching this, and it made me happy to watch these people struggle through their mild difficulties and engage in these mildly funny comedy situations. I had a good time watching it. So for that, I'll give it an A, but it's not really a great movie. It's a fun movie. It's a sweet movie. It's no stellar production, but I felt good watching it and made me kind of miss being a kid and being with my parents or away from them and on vacation. It's a sweet movie, so I'm going to give it an A. What do you think?
I think what really makes this movie is the characters of the Robinsons. They're very authentic and they're very likable people, and it's portrayed by Leslie Phillips and Geraldine McEwan. They're fun to watch. The first time I watched this movie, I was like, okay, that was all right. But the second time, I really kind of got into it, and I really enjoyed it a lot more and got more out of it. And I really, really like this movie, and I'm going to give this one an A as well. Like you, it's probably more than it deserves as a film, but it's a warm, friendly, happy movie, and I probably need more of those in my life.
Yeah, exactly. It's the chicken soup of movies. No, it's not a 4-star meal, but it's just what you need sometimes, and it makes you feel better. And you're right, the performances of Leslie Phillips and Geraldine McEwan are really what makes it. They had a genuine warmth and friendliness to each other. They disagreed, but they still loved each other. I think that made it all the more enjoyable. And while perhaps you should beware of children, one thing you don't need to beware of is our website, aippod.com. There you can find out all about the movies that we've covered. You can see lobby cards, posters, trailers, other advertising materials. You can find out where you can watch those films. There's a contact form so you can let us know how you felt about anything that we've said already, or tell us what AIP film you'd really love us to check out in the future. While you're on our site, consider going to our store. A purchase of one of our items keeps the podcast and the website going from week to week. That's aippod.com.
And that wraps our discussion of Beware of Children. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Jeff Markin.
I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in. Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.